Well, hello, welcome back, everyone. Um, I didn't. I was trying to do this in different segments, and um, it's really kind of complicated because there's a lot to it when it comes to this identity thing of people trying to find their identity. I just recently watched a ContraPoints video, and it reminded me how important this really is, and unfortunately, most of the people that probably watch my channel don't really struggle with their identity. Um, I mean, like even people like Chick Micken, who is subscribed to my channel, I believe. I think he is. I don't know if you can feel free to comment on this, Chick Micken, if you are or not, but you appear to me like he appears to me to be somebody who's staunchly conservative, very traditionalist, very much on the evangelical side of Christianity, like homosexuality is a sin, follow the role, God's will of, if you're a female, follow the role of a female via God's will, same with males kind of thing. And very, very traditional, very, very Christianic in his ways. And oftentimes you see me making arguments to him. Do I think I'm going to convince him otherwise? Probably not. But he often tries to conflate that when I talk about homosexuality, that I'm advertising it, that I'm trying to convince people to being homosexual. That's not the truth. I'm just merely stating that homosexuality is a natural element of the world. It's just something that exists. We can find it in other species of animals. We can trace it in humanity back to the very moment when human beings were able to even describe it as a thing. So, like, there's ancient drawings and cave art that illustrate homosexuality. So we know it's been with us since pretty much ever, since we've been able to communicate or articulate what it was. So, no, it's not me trying to say, hey, you should be a homosexual, but to cap up ContraPoint's video, because I'm not going to make a video about it like I usually do, a ContraPoint to ContraPoints. She's just come out as like, oh, I'm a lesbian trans female, and thinks that that's something new. It's not new. That's been a thing for, like, ever. I wish that woman would figure herself out. She's going through all this like it's a brand new thing to her, and to me it's just kind of like, oh my God. So, yeah, debating Chick Micken is fun for me because a lot of it turns into atheist versus theistic arguments, because a lot of what we debate about is things like subjective morality and objective morality, and he says that by me saying things are objective, or morality is subjective, therefore morality by itself does not exist if it is solely subjective, and I say no. Just because morality is subjective, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that we create morality, and that morality on a macro scale can seem like objective morality rather than subjective, because the mass majority of people across culture, across languages, across country tend to agree that certain specific things are immoral. So because such a massive amount of people subjectively agree that things are immoral, it seems like objective morality. That's what you would call macro morality. When you get into the micro morality, that's where things get really kind of weird and hazy, and you see a varying array of different opinions. Because ultimately morality is created by us, by the society. That is why in certain cultures or regions of the world that I cannot mention because that would be some kind of dubious hate speech, they still stone people to death. That still happens. Even though it says in the Christian Bible that they're still supposed to do that. It's right there in Leviticus. Actually, I believe it's on the same fucking page where it says, "Thou shalt not layeth with a man as a man layeth with a woman." It says you're supposed to stone to death disobedient children and anyone caught working on the Sabbath. It also says that you are allowed to procreate with your daughter to reinstate civilization should you get stranded from one. It also says that you can sell your daughter into slavery. But we're not going to talk about those things. And someone did comment on a previous video of mine saying that the three Abrahamic religions, while yes, Christianity has had its great amounts of blunders, that the one that I cannot mention because it tantamounts to some kind of dubious, hate speech crap, still participates in these things. Why, yes, I do agree with that. I think that the one that shall not be mentioned that is part of the three Abrahamic religions that you cannot mention because it tantamounts to some kind of hate speech or some kind of phobia or racism or schism or something like that, does deserve a lot of criticism because it still is kind of stuck in the Dark Ages. Where Christianity was in the Dark Ages, it's still there today. But that's neither here nor there. We're here to talk about identity. And before we begin on identity, I want to bring up this screenshot here because I'm going to read these lyrics to you. And I will leave a link to these lyrics. I'll leave a link to the lyrics. I'm not going to copy and paste the lyrics. I'll just leave a link to these lyrics in the description below. They are lyrics. Let's go ahead and pull it up now. Try to get the timing right on this. These lyrics are by a band called Sneaker Pimps. And their very first album, they've kind of had a tendency to be very nihilistic. They're a product of the 90s. What can you say? But I like this to stay on the trend of nihilism, Friedrich Nietzsche type philosophy, that kind of thing. I am kind of nihilistic myself. It's a song called Low Place Like Home. And I've seen some people kind of go down this kind of rabbit hole in searching for their identity. And what you often find is the older you get, you find your identity in a low place like home. A lot of people do things like they look through astrology, and you have ContraPoints where it's like, am I male or am I female? Oops, I guess I'm female because I'm not, heteronormative. Fucking hate these terms. He was an androgynous boy, so he goes and he transitions to female, feels that that's more befitting of him, and then finds out that he's not really attracted to men, that he's attracted to women, and feels that it was systemically placed on him as a female to be attracted to males, even though he is not. And so he's a lesbian trans woman. I couldn't care less. I could not give a fuck less. To me, this is not a glorious epiphany. It's like, okay, what do you want, a cookie? Seriously. These are some really weird identity problems people are having. These are really weird. These are things that you should know and figure out about yourself before you turn 31. I'm older than 31, but I'm just saying, this is weird stuff. But one of the things I have to attack as an atheist is, of course, the signs of the zodiac, because they're bullshit. So I'm going to read these lyrics, and hopefully they'll give you an insight into that. So, you walked all over in your blunderstones, in your own road movie with your one-armed man. Gonna make it to the problem page. Troubleshoot your life. And in that lyric right there, it's talking about those people who are on the internet filling out those personality tests to tell them who they are. So troubleshoot your life. Gonna make it to the problem page. Need some time and space just to find yourself. I hope you find yourself in a low place like home. You talked it over from your bedroom throne, making sense of nothing with your one-armed man. Read your future in the magazine. Search your stars for clues. Read your future in the magazine. Tells you what to lose just to find yourself. I hope you find yourself in a low place like home. You fall all over with your small town heels, catching hold of nothing like a one-armed man. Treat your life like a tragedy. Oh, I know a lot of people who have done this. They treat their life like a tragedy, and with self-inflict abuse. It says this right there in the lyrics. Self-inflict abuse. Treat your life like a tragedy. Precious else to choose. Crucify yourself. I'll bet you'll find yourself in a low place like home. And she's basically saying in this song that you won't really find yourself, just like Friedrich Nietzsche says. Some of the greatest things in life you will not get without an abundant amount of pain. As you know, when I was watching this Chris Watts shit that was popping up all over YouTube news feed and like my suggested feed, this guy that killed his daughters and his pregnant wife and buried them on some place that he works. I'm going to go ahead and close this window out now. So he killed his 2 daughters, killed his pregnant wife, and I started laughing at this video that showed him he was being interrogated for the crime, and he started crying, and I started laughing. Now, I thought to myself, if I was being interrogated, they'd probably think that I was a really strange person, because I'm the type of person that sits and laughs at not a serial killer, but a killer crying at his own crime. And the reason why I laugh is this very one line that was said by the Brotherhood of Pagans, a Gothic band. No life is possible without tears, even for a man who is so callous and cold inside that he could kill his own family in flesh and blood. No life is possible without tears. Nothing great in this life comes without pain. There is some sort of sacrifice that usually comes in life. And that's what I don't get about these people who go around offended and triggered by everything, like whether they're people on the right or the left. I mean, you know, people are like, oh my God, it's a homosexual on YouTube talking openly about his homosexuality. I'm so offended. Or whether it be the people on the left that are like, oh my God, he said the word faggot and I'm gay and I'm so offended. Oh. It doesn't really matter, because to really truly find who you are, sometimes you have to go through that kind of pain. You know, to me, it's not painful anymore. You know, if you were to come, like, well, first of all, I don't want to make it too complicated. I'm rambling. I need to stay on track. So I wanted to open up with that because I think those are beautiful lyrics, and they're beautiful lyrics, and they're about finding yourself, and they're about saying, like, you know, all this other shit where people are trying to tell you who to be, they're full of shit. So let me get something out in the open. I'm goth. I'm anti-uniformity and anti-conformity. So anti-mainstream, anti-pop. I don't really like having to go and work for a big corporation that wants you to wear a uniform little monkey suit and look and say and think like everyone else. I hate that concept. I revel in my ability to be different than everyone else. In fact, I almost strive for it. And then I found others that were like that reveled in madness, you know, that strived to be different, deliberately strived to be different than everyone else. And that doesn't include the homosexuality. I mean, that has nothing to do with it. Okay, homosexuality does not define who I am. I define who I am. So one of the things that I've seen thrown out there other than astrology, and astrology is just sheer bullshit. It's just a fucking paragraph of nonsense. If you actually read through astrology, it can apply to almost anyone. You'll find that what you do when you read astrology is you cherry pick the things out about your sign that fit you, and you ignore all the stuff that has nothing to do with you. And then you start, if you actually pay attention, it contradicts itself. And it does that to sure measure. And you'd be surprised how much we all have in common, just based on simple human emotions. But that aside, I'm going to focus on this one thing. Defending your heritage, your ancestry. So I started thinking to myself, why should I defend my ancestry? Why should I defend my heritage? What is my heritage? My heritage is Native American, English, Scottish. There's some Germanic, Norwegian shit in there, possibly some Northern European-esque shit. And that's my heritage. Okay, that's my ancestry. Does that have anything to do with who I am today? No. No, I can't say that it has anything to do with who I am today. How do I define myself today? I define myself as goth. Why? Why goth? I like things that are dark. I like ghost stories. I like things that are macabre. I am not freaked out by snuff films. I find them interesting. I find serial killers and the psychology and criminology of serial killers to be fascinating. Do I agree with what they do? No. Do I find them fascinating? Yes. Do I want to learn about medieval torture devices? Yes, absolutely. That sounds like an absolutely intriguing subject matter. That sounds like something that would keep my attention more so than learning about the intricacies of, let's say, the 1860s. Unless we're talking about postmortem daguerreotypes. That's an interesting subject matter to me. But I remember in English class learning about Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens. Wasn't too intrigued or fascinated by any of that shit, or The Great Gatsby. That was the most boring piece of fucking literature I think I've ever read in my whole life. But then I came across this book called Sleeping Beauty. Not the Disney shit. Not Sleeping Beauty like she fell asleep and she's waiting for the prince's kiss to wake her up. No. This was a book about postmortem daguerreotype artistry. Like, it looked at postmortem daguerreotypes as an art. And it talked about the history of it. It talked about the grieving and mourning process that we had back in the 1800s. And it was such a fascinating book, I had to rent it several times from the library. And I even made copies of some of the pages because some of the photos of the dead people that were in it just captivated me. I liked them. I don't know why, but I just find the death aesthetic to be aesthetically pleasing. You are looking at a person that wants, in their lifetime, to be able to obtain a human skull. Because I like the aesthetic value of having a human skull sitting on my desk. I like the color black. I like deep red. I like Victorian artwork and Gothic architecture and Victorian architecture. I like these things. People were calling me goth before I even knew what that word meant. one of the problems I find with goth channels is a lot of them focus on trying to define what goth is, rather than just being themselves and just being goth. And the reason I call this a goth channel is because most of my videos are pessimistic. They're dark. I'm a pessimistic person. I look at the darker side of things, but just as Roz Williams, gothic rock singer from Christian Death, said, I've come to rule the dark for light. Those who live in heaven know nothing of hell. That's just getting into my own personal philosophies. But it plays back into what Friedrich Nietzsche was saying, is that you really don't understand the beauty of life until you understand the pain of life. How can you understand the beauty if you're constantly overlooking it because, well, how do I put it to you? How do I put it in a way that's easily digestible and understandable? Hold on, let me get my vape. Let's say that the worst thing that ever happened to you was your dog got hit by a car. That's the worst thing you've ever experienced. The worst. And let's say that you're just overtaken by this tragedy. So the most tragic event that has ever happened to you. You're crying, you're mourning, you're grieving over the loss of this pet that you had, you loved. You have a loving family, a loving mother, loving father, loving sibling. Now let's say that you, in this process of mourning and grieving, try to tell a person that the world is a dark and horrible and cruel place because it's a place where your dog can get hit by a car. Now let's say that you're saying this to a person whose entire family, including their younger brother, their mom, and their loving mother, their loving father, all died in a fire. Or let's say you're telling this to a person that escaped from a country that had some weird militia group form where they were cutting the heads off of people who were not fundamentally religious as them. And in the process, you witnessed your own mother and your own father have their heads cut off. You escaped with your sister, and you tried to get to another place on the world where this couldn't happen to you. And in the process of doing that, you lost your sister, found out your sister died. You had to hide who you were and your identity by pretending to be a woman. Realized in that process that you were trans, that you identified as a woman, and finally reached a place where you could transition into a woman without having your head cut off. And now you live in this new place, knowing that your mother and father got their heads chopped off because they didn't align with the religious views as evangelically as the people who cut their heads off, and that your sister was killed by those same people, and you finally fled that place to end up in another place that won't cut your head off. And you're telling them that the world is dark because your dog got hit by a car. Can you imagine how that would sound? And can you imagine how grateful that person is to even be alive? There's so many things I think that we take for granted. Like, we should be thankful that we have the ability to be cognitively aware of our own cognizance. We should be thankful that we can look up at the stars and know that we are a living organism ourselves. Be self-aware and know what those stars are. And that one day that's going to be taken away from us. So this is what I'm saying, is that if you don't understand how painful life can be, you're not going to respect how beautiful the things are that are already around you. The fact that you are alive and breathing, that it could be worse. You could be dead. This is why I like to sit and contemplate deliberately about death and the fact that I'm going to die over and over and over again until I get a panic attack. Because once that's over with, I look at the world around me and I realize I take simple things for granted, and we all do. Like being able to watch the sun rise in the morning. Watch flowers bloom. Listen to birds chirp. One day, all of us, it's going to happen. Death is inevitable. That will be taken away. One day we will die. We will no longer be able to watch the sunrise. We will no longer be able to watch the flowers bloom. We will no longer be able to feel love and its sharp sting when we are rejected. And you will not have the consciousness or the cognizance to regret not loving that sensation of pain while you had the ability to even experience it. I hope that puts a little bit more in perspective to you. But I'm goth, okay? So what does any of that have to do with my Native American ancestry? I mean, they did some tribalistic things to dance with death, and they would consume... They would take a giant wad of tobacco leaves and huff and puff on them, raising the carbon dioxide level in their body to a point where their body thought they were dying, and have like kind of a near-death experience that would give them some sort of enlightenment. That's kind of similar to dwelling on death to the point of having a panic attack. I've done a death walk before. I've taken a dissociative hallucinogen to the point where I was on the brink of death and actually had a instinctual response in my brain that said, "Don't fall asleep or you'll die." I felt my heart seizing up and realized that I had dosed enough on this drug that if I had done just a little bit more, I would have been in a coma. And that's what my body was fighting. It was fighting going into a coma or dying. So I kept moving. I lived through it. And that was interesting once the drug wore off and saw the sun rise and the flowers bloom. It was an amazing experience. Not something I would recommend doing unless you have somebody with you that is very, very experienced. Don't do that at home.
What does that have to do with my European ancestry? Any of it?
Germanic, Scottish, English, not a fucking thing. Everything who I am today has to do with where I was raised and the things that I've taken liking to. No one, well, I mean, maybe an ancestor from the 1800s did some post-mortem daguerreotypes, or at least had seen them, but usually only the rich people could afford those at the time. And I don't know that there were any rich people in my heritage. And I mean, if we go all the way back to my European ancestors, they're probably so far removed from what we live in today with technological advancements, medical advancements. I'd probably have absolutely nothing in common with them. Absolutely nothing. So I don't know what it is that I'm defending. I did not ban with a bunch of goths under the label goth. People were calling me goth because I liked dark things. And I found like-minded people and started associating with them, and even found people that I would not call goth that I still find of like mind. Predominantly atheists like myself. Richard Darwin is a subscriber to mine. I think him and I would probably sit down and have a very intellectual conversation. Does that mean that he's goth? No. Does it mean that we need to be under some kind of banner or label? No. It's just two like-minded people. Yes, there are variances in our opinions, and that's beautiful. That's a fine thing. That means that we won't agree on everything. Why would you want to sit and have a conversation with somebody that you agreed on every single thing with? He certainly is quick to point out when he disagrees with me or I'm wrong on something. Like, for instance, I was wrong. Human beings, he pointed this out to me, and I thank him for it. Human beings do not have the lowest genetic variance, although our genetic variance is quite low. We are not the species with the lowest genetic variance. So thank you for pointing that out to me, Mr. Richard Darwin. I appreciate that. So, why do we need to defend our heritage? Why do we need to defend our ancestry? What is the relevance or importance in that? Who I am today, I'd be willing to bet you $1 million. Not for real. I don't have $1 million to even spend. But, and I doubt anyone that watches my videos has $1 million. A gentleman's bet, let's say, that if I were to do a genealogy test and find any relative that would pop up on the timeline anywhere that would even have left a footprint, which probably no one in my family has, I would bet you they would think I was really very, very bizarre. And I don't think that I would probably have much in common with any of them. Even the Native Americans' bloodline would probably think I was very bizarre. They'd probably be like, why are you so obsessed with death? Why are you so obsessed with, why we're here? What is the meaning of life? That kind of thing. Why do you keep pondering these questions that cause you to have severe panic attacks and, trigger the response mechanism in your brain that ultimately is designed to make you fight or flee away from a problem that is problematic to your well-being. I doubt anyone in my family lineage would understand that. I doubt anyone in my family lineage would understand why I would want a human skull. I doubt anyone in my family lineage would understand why I like dark things. In fact, probably some of them would probably think I was a witch and want to burn me or dance with Satan or something like that if you go far back in the European timeline. It has nothing to do with who I am today. If you took them from back in time and placed them here, culture, civilization, society has changed so much they wouldn't recognize it. They'd probably just, I don't even know what they would do. I mean, you want to talk about pure mind being blown, that's it. We literally, like, I talked to my grandmother about this. She's in her 80s. My grandpa's in his 90s. I've talked to them about, can you imagine if I went back in time to when my grandmother, who's 87 years old now, when she was 14, and tried to explain what a smartphone is to her. It'd be completely beyond her grasp. She wouldn't believe me. She'd think I was a lunatic. And if I tried to explain to her what shock rock was, or what goth is, what it stands for, what it means, and why I want to collect postmortem daguerreotypes from the 1800s, she'd probably think, again, I was a lunatic. But since she is alive now, she knows what these things are. So that's my immediate family. What makes you think I have any commonality, or you or anyone out there has any commonality with their ancestry from thousands of years ago? And I think a lot of people sit with their fingers crossed, hoping that somebody along their family lineage was someone important, because deep down inside we have this desire to feel important. Repeat after me. I am the master of nothing. Nothing is everything, and everything is nothing. You probably don't have someone important. And if you do, they're so far removed from your own family lineage of who you are today, it bears no importance or relevance now. There's a lot of people with Genghis Khan's genetics floating around inside of them because he had sex a lot and had a lot of children. That doesn't mean that you get to inherit anything from his dynasty. And it doesn't mean that you identify with his particular form of Asian culture. And that's the thing about culture. Just as I have found a culture that is befitting of me, which is goth, someone who is Caucasian, that is predominantly European, can find more that they can identify with in an Asian culture, or maybe it could be a European culture, or maybe it could be a neo-culture like goth, or punk, or hippies. Culture is not something you carry in your genetics. There is no evidence for that, and the only people who regurgitate that are people who need that to be true. But it isn't. You can choose what culture you want to belong to. You can't choose your race. You can't choose your sexual orientation. But what you can do is you can choose what you like. Or maybe you can't. Either way, though, I mean, let's say you're black and you like European culture. So what? Let's say you're white and you like Asian culture. You identify with it more. So what? I don't understand what the problem is. You don't need homogeny What you should do instead of trying to conform is you should try to find what it is that you do like and what you do identify with. And find people that you can relate to. And don't be so proud to be part of the popular. And don't be ashamed if you're not part of the popular.
Sometimes being strange and different
is a good thing. So, the questions that I posed, and I'll leave them in the description below, is this. You must defend your heritage. My question to that is why? You must look unto your ancestry. And again, my question to that is why? Do these things really define who you are as an individual? Well, the answer to that question in my case is no. And if they do not, then how does one define themselves as an individual? Well, you define yourself as an individual and you find like-minded individuals like-minded people. People you can relate and identify with. Are we really so desperate for identity that we must cling to the archaic inklings of tribalism? That's a good question. You do not need to conform under one banner to find your identity, because it's not finding your identity. That's creating an identity that other people want you to have. Rather, you find others who are like you, and you form a bond with them. I think that's the better alternative. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. I know I went off on a lot of tangents. I'm trying to keep it as linear as possible without veering off too much. It's really difficult, though, because there's a lot of weird identity crisis things going on out there that it's quite a struggle to unpack in one video. There might be more. But, you know, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Maybe this is just a brain, like, just as TJ Kirk puts it, brain puke. And you're free to say that in the comments section. Or maybe you did find something in this a little bit enlightening. Whatever. Just like, share, subscribe, hit the bell button on any channel you're subscribed to. And I believe in choices, not one's ability to impose one's will on others against their own will.